What's up, everyone? How's it going? This is Intro to GitHub. I'm going to be operating in just a second. Okay, let's start jumping in. What's up, everyone? My name is Zane, coach, streamer here at MLH. Today, we're going to be talking about GitHub. We got some viewers in here. Curious if we can get any love in the chat. Let me go ahead and post our event link here. So make sure to go ahead and pop into this URL here, post it in the chat. Go ahead and sign in to check into the events. And without further ado, we can get started. Let's get our topic of the night underway over here. GitHub. Okay. Bring the music down and we'll jump right into it. There we go. Okay, welcome everyone. Intro to GitHub. That is going to be the topic of discussion for the night. So I'm just curious, who here has used GitHub before? Who here is pretty experienced with it? Who here has dabbled around a little bit with it? And for who here is it completely no? Just curious. Pretty important force in the programming sphere. So never heard of it before. This is going to be hopefully a great primer for you to get to know a little bit about know about the service, about the website. Let's jump right in. So what is GitHub exactly? GitHub is a web-based platform and service for version control and collaborative software development. So primarily, as it says, a web-based platform. Really, we just say it's just a website. Really, go ahead and take a look at it. I'll share my screen here. Boom. So let's take a look at GitHub. So with GitHub, you can basically find a bunch of people's programming projects hosted on this website. And it's nice because if someone has a project that they've made and that you like, you can download the code of that project directly and you can work with it. You can, load the project yourself. You can make your own additions to like modify it. There's a whole world of possibilities. And two, you can also upload your own code. It's a bit of a simplified explanation of it, but it kind of gets the heart of it down. You can search for all sorts of projects on GitHub. Just randomly typed in Pokemon. There's a lot of video game based projects here, so usually something everyone likes. Like someone like here, just search up Pokemon. There's all these different Pokemon focused coding projects. Like this one here, Pokemon Go map. Live visualization of all the Pokemon in your area and more. Oh, well, cease and desist. Oh, that's too bad. Anyways, cool project at the end of the day. So if you're a Pokemon Go fanatic and you wanted to learn more about just the stuff that's in your area, here you go. Someone made a program for it. So you can download this, you can run it yourself. You can even take that code and make your own adjustments to it. You make your own add-ons, or you can use it to build on your own project, incorporate into a larger project, whatever it is that you want to do. GitHub is perfect for that. I know. I really wasn't expecting that cease and desist, but oh man. Here, let's bring up the mood a little bit. Pokemon Red with reinforcement learning. So I'm guessing AI generated. AI plays Pokemon. There we go. Look at that. Crazy. So anyways, all this code, anything that you can imagine and more. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit more about what exactly GitHub is in terms of its features and everything and what exactly it can help you accomplish, so on and so forth. So we're going to look a little bit more at the website here in depth in a bit. But we're going to talk about some things first to connect to our overview of the website. That way things make a little bit more sense. We'll have a little bit more context as we go around it. So as we said, and as we saw, GitHub is a web-based platform and a service for version control and collaborative software development. So there's these different aspects, different features just to be aware of. Version control, repositories, collaboration, so on and so forth. We're going to delve into these and cover them because they're pretty important to the just the fundamental nature of GitHub and what you want to use it for. So we're jumping into version control. Actually, let's start here. So version control, which we'll talk about in more detail as we saw. So version control. GitHub is primarily used for version control, which is the practice of tracking and managing changes to software code over time. It allows developers to work on projects without interfering with each other's work. It provides a history of changes, making it easier to understand and fix issues. We'll delve into version control in very vivid detail just a little bit. But it really is the start of the show of something like of GitHub itself. So we have repositories. In GitHub, code is organized into repositories. A repository is a collection of files and directories along with the version history of those files. It can be public, allowing anyone to view and contribute to the code, or private, which restricts access to a select group of collaborators. So let's change it up a little bit. Let's show some examples of this. So version control, practice of tracking and managing changes to software code over time, and as it says, allows developers to work on projects without interfering with each other's work, provide a history of changes, make it easier to understand and fix issues. Let's see what it looks like in one of these actual GitHub projects that we saw. So now we're back on GitHub. And again, we have all these projects that we can go through. I can search up anything if I want to. I just chose Pokemon because that's something that most people know and get excited about. But we can go, let's go to that Pokemon Red experiments. So we were talking about version control, right? Where you can track and manage changes to your software code. So we'll kind of talk about the particular lingo and everything in a little bit. But if you ever go onto a project like this Pokemon Red experiments, this is that AI plays Pokemon one. You can see we have all of the code here. We can actually access every single file that they've made public at least. There's usually a decent amount. There's directories here or different folders, which will have more files inside, of course. Let's see. And I can go to this folder and find more. So we're seeing like some Python files and like, so, we're seeing some genuine code here. And too, there's like images and text files and whatever is needed for the project at the end of the day. So we can really go in here and again, we can like download this code, put it onto our machine, run this, make our own adjustments to it. But the cool thing about this is we can see how the project's evolved with these commits here. So commits are kind of like, in essence, kind of a snapshot of your project at particular points along its development. So the more snapshots that you have, the more commits that you have throughout the development process, the more instances throughout its development that you can go back to and reference. And there's tons of reasons as to why you'd want to do that. But again, we'll cover that in detail later on. So if we go back to the older commits, old, we should be able to see the project and its code base in a pretty elementary state with likely not too many files or the like. Here we see the initial commit. So we should be able to see the code base let's see, browse files. So there's nothing in here except for the README, which just has nothing, just that. So let's go on a little bit further ahead. So these are all different snapshots of the code base at different times. So for this one, he did the basic setup, added some more things. Testing image pyramid, KNN. Not exactly sure what that means, but apparently it was meaningful enough to take a snapshot of it. You take these snapshots at meaningful points, right? You don't just want to go around with your Kodak taking pictures of absolutely everything. Why take pictures of meaningless things or things that don't have reason to have pictures taken of them, right? So once you have enough meaningful progress on a project, whatever that may mean in a particular context, usually you make your snapshot there. So here we see a lot more files here. We don't have like the amount of directories or anything that we had in the actual finished, or not finished, but the latest version of the file, or the latest version of the project, with all of these different directories and like. It's definitely a lot more fleshed out here, but it's getting there. So with this, you can keep track of how your project develops over time. And again, there's a lot of utility within this, as that's we'll go over in just a little bit. But that's first to look at version control. Version control meaning you take these snapshots of your project at different points. That way you can refer back to them, or so on and so forth. We'll see in detail. So the next point that we talked about was repositories. So again, repositories is a collection of files and directories along with version history of those files. That's exactly what we were just looking through, right? We were looking through the repository of this Pokemon Red experiments. We see here's the code of the repository. Here's the commits, or the version control history of this particular project within this, that's hosted within this repository, so on and so forth. So hope that helps connect these explanations to like what is actually going on. So with repositories, they can either be public, allowing anyone to view and contribute to the code, or private, which restricts access to a select group of collaborators. So you have options there as to whether you want everyone to be able to see your code, or if you only want a select amount of people to. So just powerful stuff. Okay, so next we have collaboration. GitHub facilitates collaboration by allowing multiple developers to work on the same project. Developers can clone a repository to their local machines, make changes, and then push those changes back to the GitHub repository. This makes it easy to work on software development projects as a team. So again, let's hop over to GitHub and see exactly how this takes place and what this really looks like on the site itself. So with collaboration here, we can see, let's just look at some of the different perspectives and instances of collaboration on this project. So one of the ways to do that is to go to the issues. So these are things that the code base, bugs or something's missing or whatever you can conceive of as an issue in a project. People will make it aware so that developers can go in and see what it's all about, see if they have to fix something. If they do have to fix it, then they can work on their fix and contribute it to the project, so on and so forth. So let's see if we have, I want to see one that's maybe a little bit more, show some, okay. Let's do one with a bit more discussion on it. Nothing I can really readily jump into, but basically, it's actually a good perspective here. So these branches here, we'll talk about branches in a minute. But branches are like kind of, they're copies of the code here. They're copies of the code of this code repository that people will then branch off from the main original source of the code and kind of make their own adjustments to things. So say I download this Pokemon Red experiments and I want to add a new feature myself. or just maybe like do a little bug fix or whatever. I'm going to change the code relative to the current version as it exists. Once I make my change, I can request for my changes to go back onto the GitHub. So if we look at these branches here, these are all different copies. These active branches here, these are all different copies of the current code base. Someone for each one is most likely working on a new feature or a bug fix or whatever it is that they want to update the current copy of the code base with. And when they're done with these, when they're done with whatever it is that they're developing, then they can make the next step of trying to get that integrated, whatever their change is, integrated into the code base as it exists on the site, as we saw a second ago, like here. So to do that, they would do pull requests. And well, again, we'll talk about that in detail, but you can just see how this is all like these pull requests here are like the changes that they've ended up making from their branches. And then the team of developers or whoever goes over these changes, makes sure that they're proper fixes to the code or that they're features that they need or that they're implemented in a viable way, so on and so forth. And if so, they can get added to the main project and the whole code base gets updated with whatever that new addition is. Or the pull requests, the attempt to contribute additional change to the code base, which is essentially what a pull request is. It can either be accepted or it can be rejected, where a person can continue to work on it or they just throw it out, whatever it is, whatever the particular context is that works best. We will go over this in detail. This is just a bit of a quicker overview of how this stuff works. But I think it's helpful to get kind of get a visceral understanding here of just how this is all laid out on the actual website itself before we really go into talking about it in more and more detail. So yes, collaboration is a big aspect of GitHub, as you can see, with the addition of support for like branches, which then lead to pull requests, and which both these can often stem from issues if there's something to contribute or fix. So definitely in the architecture of the site itself, it definitely is built for collaboration. So let's see, we got some comments in the chats. Great info. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, I hope this is insightful for everyone here. If there's any more questions, by all means, please go ahead and ask. This is as much of a discussion as it is a tutorial. So has each branch been forked from the original code? Yes, that's a perfect way to say it. In fact, well, so there is, I think you have to be a little bit careful with your terminology, because a fork is actually its own separate thing that's that you think would be kind of similar to a branch. We'll talk about it. But yeah, essentially branches. So there is something known as a fork, which is like its own terminology within this sort of GitHub version control workflow, which we'll get to. But in a more by using fork in a more general sense here, yeah, it's kind of like you take this main code base. So usually how it works is that you have this master branch, which is kind of like the source of truth. Like everything will ultimately all contribute to the master branch, which is the ideal. Because with that, then everything has like one source of truth. Everything has one sort of thing to pull from. Ideally, you want your code base to be one ultimate source, right? One ultimate thing that you can download and be representative of your project. That's kind of what the master branch represents. So people will branch off from the master branch whenever they want to go on to develop a new feature or bug fix, or whatever it is. That way, say they're developing a new feature and they break the code base for whatever reason. Well, now they haven't messed up the master branch. So that kind of remains untouched. So you don't have to like do a bunch of work to undo everything that you fixed, that you broke, and blah, 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 right? It'd be a big mess. There's quite a few reasons, or there's a few more reasons for branching and all, but that's a good primer for now. When I fork a branch, am I working on it on my own, or does the owner of it see that too? So, good question. Again, let's clarify exactly what forking means in this context, or in the context of, because again, there's a particular concept known as forking with GitHub. So, right up here. So forks. So we have this project. So let's kind of start from the basics, from scratch. So we have this project on GitHub, right? This Pokemon Red experiments. It's being hosted within this repository, right? This is the repository for this Pokemon Red experiments project. Now, what a lot of people will do is that, so they go, okay, I see this project. It's very nice. I want to contribute to it. I want to do something to help make my own stuff with it. What they'll do is that they'll fork the project, it's called. So you go to code, and then I'm not signed in, so I probably won't be able to see it here. But I would essentially copy this repository. So I would clone this repository onto my own account, meaning that here's this code. I want to contribute to it. I copy this repository on GitHub onto my own GitHub account so that I now have my own individual repository that's exactly the same as this in terms of its contents. It's not the same literal repository, but it is like a carbon copy. Now, in fact, we can see, so that's what a fork is. The fork is that carbon copy of the initial repository that you then make onto your own GitHub account. I'll explain why you want to do that in just a second, but we can see that this repository here, it's been forked 468 times. So I'm sure that if we go on here, we can see, oh, so annoying. So hoping I didn't have to do that. Send it to my GitHub. Just that way, we don't have to goof around with things. But yeah, with that, when we fork it, then we can go on to, let's see. Here we go. Okay. So we'll share this. So let's do share screen. Present my screen. And we'll do this. Okay. So we can see I'm in this Pokemon Red experiments. And now I'm going to the forks, right? So here's all the forks of this repository, right? Here's all these carbon copies that people made on their own GitHub account. Fork. Oh, it's creating a new fork. I think they let me see other people's. Funny. But anyways, yeah. So now I would go on to make my own fork of this, for example. So you know what? Let's do it. Let's make my own fork of it. I will be the. Oh, I already did this one. Okay. Fork one. Let's do that. Really? Crazy. Well, then I already have it on my account. I guess I must have played around with this one. Let's do repositories. Here we go, Pokemon Red experiments. So here's my own carbon copy with the one repository. Now I haven't played around with this repository. Mine got out of sync. There's been, you can see here, this branch is 39 commits behind. So in the actual repository for this project, or not the actual one, but from the original source, from the original repository, people made changes. And so I did not keep up on those. So what I can do is, I guess I can just sync it. And there we go. Boom. So now it's up to date. Now it's a carbon copy. Now I don't necessarily always want it to be a carbon copy, because what you ultimately want to do is I go, okay, well, here's my copy of this repository that I have because I want to develop my own feature. I want to, fix a bug. I want to change it in some way. So I would connect this I would download this code onto my computer or onto my local machine. And I'd make my changes. I go into my VS Code, my code editor, I make all my changes. I take snapshots along the way at meaningful points so that I can capture like a save state, I guess if you wanted to call it, at all the different meaningful points that I've made in the development of my new addition to the project. And then now all the changed code exists on my computer, but I have to get it onto GitHub. So I upload the changed code onto my repository of the project, right? My forked copy of the original repository. And so my forked copy is now different from the original repository, from the original person who developed this project. And I want to, well, I have two things that I could do, right? Maybe I want to make my own project. And so maybe I want to use this as a basis and just make my own project completely by myself going forward. So this can just exist as its own repository, and people can download my version of whatever it is that I'm doing with it. Or if I'm developing a new feature or something to ultimately go back to the original repository, to the original project, then I can like submit a pull request and try to get my contributions added back into the original repository ultimately. So a couple functions for forking. But yeah, that's where you have to be. Like, I know we see branch here. Like, we see this terminology of branch. And when you want to like understand it, you can ask about forking. Okay, do branches fork? But it turns out that forking is a particular concept. So I just wanted to clear that up. So that's what forking is technically, as a established concept in version control and GitHub and all that. But yeah, I think that kind of clears it up. Let me know if there's any additional questions on that. Good question in all. So with that, let's keep pushing on. Yeah, happy to help. I'm glad it was glad it cleared it up. So, well, let's see. So when I fork a branch, am I working on it on my own, or does the owner of it see that too? So as long as you could probably fork it and then make it, and then you have your own repository of it, right? So you could make it private, I'd imagine. Whether they can easily like track down your fork of it, I'd imagine so. I'm not too sure like how directly they can like trace your fork. I'd imagine they could, just as we saw there was that like, how many projects fork this or blah, blah, blah. But yeah. Okay, so we actually covered quite a bit of just good stuff to know with GitHub, just by immersion. Always love that. Just by diving in and kind of getting our hands dirty with it. Okay, so as we talked about version control, right, those snapshots of your project, repositories where the code is hosted and where you can see the version control history. Collaboration, we saw how GitHub is built for collaboration with, issues, branches, pull requests, being able to fork, so on and so forth. So branching and merging. GitHub supports branching, which allows developers to work on separate features or bug fixes without affecting the main code base, right? Just like we talked about. Branches can be created, modified, and merged back into the main code base using pull requests, which enable code review and discussion before integration. So yeah, that's actually a really good point as well. Let's dive deeper into some pull requests, say on this project. So as we know, pull requests, it's like you develop something new for the code base, you want it to get implemented into the source code base, right? You want your contributions to be part of the main project, for the main project to be updated to include it. So in this project, here's some pull requests that are being suggested. So these people already made changes to the code. Now it's for the main developers or whoever has the authority to permit or deny code changes to this original project. So it's up for them to review it and give a pass or not, or to accept the pull request or not. So let's see. This one is style changes and typing everywhere. So typing, as I'm sure like primitive data types, and so on and so forth. So now when a person makes a pull request, just like how you want to comment in your code to give context as to things. So when you make a pull request, you want to give context. You want to give explanation of what it is that you're doing, why it should be added, what it accomplishes, so on and so forth. So we can see this person reorganize imports, added typing. Rename start with. Okay, so just definitely nice things. Here are the different version controls, snapshots, right? The 4 different commits that this person made. And now we can see it started some discussion, right? Let's see. I mean, typing would also allow using and so people are asking, okay, so here's the person who owns the project, right? So they saw the pull request and they're saying, okay, these additions look nice. How thoroughly have you tested all these changes? Are you making sure this is, because maybe this person doesn't want to take the time. Maybe they're very busy or they're organizing this whole project. Maybe they can't go through and test everything. This person's making the original person to develop this. If they want to contribute to this project, might as well cover all the bases, right? While they're already putting through all this work. So just the ultimate point is you can see how this opens up a discussion, because this project is, I don't know, it's a living, breathing thing that a lot of people are working on. So this sort of ability for communication is very, very crucial. So we can see how it's built in into GitHub, right within the the details of each individual pull request. So powerful, powerful, powerful stuff. Okay, so we saw that with branching and merging, right? As we said, there's code review and discussion before integration of pull requests, as we just saw there. So we have issue tracking. GitHub includes an issue tracking system, making it easy to manage and prioritize tasks, bug reports, and feature requests. Issues can be assigned to team members, labeled for categorization, and linked to specific code changes. So we looked at issues a little bit earlier, but again, let's just dive right in. So we can see for this project, 33 issues. So an issue doesn't necessarily, a pull request kind of has a lot of weight to it, you could say, because someone went in and they forked it, they made all these additions to the code, will most likely establish version histories. So they put effort into it, right? There's you don't just take the code, develop things willy-nilly usually, right? So there's quite a bit of weight to a pull request. Issues are usually a lot more lightweight. Again, kind of like the first things that you come up with, where you notice, okay, here's something about the project that could be addressed, or here's something about the project that could possibly be addressed. Maybe it's really not that big of an issue. Maybe someone misinterpreted something that the project is doing and they thought it was an issue, or who knows what. Again, context, communication. Super important to get everything in a row for a project. Issues is like that first stepping stone for the community to kind of weigh in on when it comes to like taking responsibility for developments of the project. So I want to see if there's something that's not so like hyper specific to the project that we can readily jump into. Visualization tutorials. Okay. So I'm guessing just visualizing some data or something. Not entirely sure off the top of my, just not entirely sure, like just jumping into this, but my guess is I want to see the data that's coming out of this, or I want to be able to view something, right? So this person, maybe the README doesn't have enough context to it. So this user is asking, okay, well, can someone develop a tutorial on how I can see this stuff? I like to be able to see the map and the charts from my training runs that show where I've been moving, what actually have been taken. Okay, so this can definitely be the start of an addition to the code base. Someone can see this and they can go, okay, well, this sounds like a great thing to implement. So I have the skills, and then maybe another person, that same person says, I have the skills to implement this. So let's go ahead and do that. So they fork the repository, They download the code on their local machine. They start making changes. They take snapshots along the way. They, version control. They get their new feature to a point that they like. So then they push it. Then they put it onto GitHub on their own fork, and then they try to merge it into the actual project with a pull request. And you can see how the whole process gets going with this, right? And it all starts with this. So this could be an actual thing to address. Or, maybe someone puts up an issue and so there's a little bit of discussion on it saying, okay, I see how you see this. Maybe it's something to implement. Someone else comes along and says, well, actually, da, 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 da. Okay, actually, we don't have to do this. Or, we can work on this later or whatever it is, right? It's all about communication. So with that is issue tracking. And we could see too, like there were comments and such. You can have a whole discussion on issues there you can have with a merge or a pull request. So with that, hold on. Lots of talking. Got my sparkling water here to keep me through this. Yeah, any questions or anything of the sort, please drop them in the chat. I'd love to address anything that's on anyone's mind, or just open a discussion that we can all contribute to. So, community and social coding. GitHub is more than a version control platform. It is a social network for developers. Developers and teams can follow each other, star and fork repositories, and engage in discussions related to code changes and issues. This fosters a sense of community and knowledge sharing among developers. So as we saw, right, even within the issues and the pull requests and everything, there's forms for each of those individual items where people can have a full-on discussion. Communication is everything when you're working with a team, especially when you're working with such a decentralized team as, well, really potentially the entire internet. So very, very important. Integration and automation. GitHub supports integration with various third-party tools and services through its extensive API. This allows for automated workflows, continuous integration, and deployment pipelines, making it a central hub for the software development lifecycle. And then two, always good stuff, open source. GitHub is widely used for open source projects, but it also supports private repositories, making it a versatile choice for public and proprietary software development. So overall, GitHub has become an integral part of modern software development, not only for individual developers, but also for teams and organizations working on open source and private projects. It provides a robust set of tools and features to streamline the development process and enhance collaboration, making it an essential platform for the software development community. So pretty important stuff here. Okay, with that, let's dive a little bit more into version control. So I already saw a bit of version control, like with the commits in the project, but we know a little bit more into it here. I guess, again, it's version control, honestly, is really the heart of GitHub. Since Git is kind of the foundation of GitHub, which we'll get to talking about in a little bit. So version control, also known as source control or revision control, is a system that tracks changes to files and directories over time. It is a crucial tool used in software development, content creation, and various other fields where managing and collaborating on digital files is essential. So ultimately, there's a couple like key features, benefits that we can talk about. One is history tracking. Version control systems maintain a detailed history of changes made to files. Each change is associated with metadata, including the author, timestamp, and a description of the modification. This historical record provides a clear timeline of project development. So we saw that earlier. Let's dive in again. So what is issue tracking? So issue tracking, went over that a couple minutes before, but we can go over it again super quick. It's kind of just this like this issue tab here. So I have this project. or well, it's not mine, but we found this project on GitHub, right? This AI plays Pokemon and all this, like basically training an AI model to be able to play Pokemon, looks like. So this is a coding project. Here's all the code for it. And here's folders which have all sorts of other files and the like. And this project is available for people to download and develop further enhancements on. So this issues tab here are issues that GitHub users have noticed within the project, or at least things that they've interpreted as issues, and there might be a discussion that has to be had on whether this is actually an issue that actually exists or that's worth attacking, so on and so forth. So with these issues here, again, these are just different things within the project that people felt the need to bring to people's attention to potentially develop something to potentially develop a fix for these things. So we looked at a particular issue earlier. Let's look at, what's a good one? Error installing dependencies. So this seems like a bug that someone's having. So they go on, they give context, so on and so forth. And there's been discussion. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just being able to make these issues in the first place, and like everything that kind of stems from that. So when I do git clone, command line interface command on my local machine, does it clone outside of the repository framework? Does it go into a local new repo on my machine? Does it clone outside of the repository framework? Does it clone? So if I'm understanding your question right, are you asking, like, say here. So let's say I take this code and yeah, so here we go. So like you clone it onto your machine. Well, it's not like so when you have this code cloned onto your machine and you start making changes to the code and everything, it's not that it's like automatically going to update the GitHub or anything. There are Git commands that will allow you to ultimately update the code base here. Well, not, there's different permissions and the like, depending on the permissions that your GitHub account has for this particular project. So like you or me, like, we don't have admin permissions or whatever for this particular project. So we couldn't like clone this, make a bunch of changes, then like immediately push it. We just wouldn't have access to that. But you ultimately can reflect the changes on your local machine onto GitHub, of course. That's kind of the big main appeal. But does that answer your question? I'm not sure if I'm understanding it like 100%, but does that clear things up? If not, go ahead and I guess go ahead and rephrase it, and we'll tackle it again. Nice. Is this feature available for public repositories only? For the issues, I'm sure it's available for private repositories as well. But if it's private, then only the people that have access to it can, view it and then go on to make issues or anything else, like, fork it, do pull requests, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I'm sure it's available for private as well. Notice that sometimes it rejects my access also to clone a repo. Okay, interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd kind of have to see the particular context that you're working within. Like if there's a particular project that you used, there's a particular repository that you try to clone from, so on and so forth, to kind of see how it behaves. It's interesting. Maybe if it's a private repository, you might not be able to clone it. I'm not, but I'm just completely guessing at this point. I'd have to see. So, yeah, I mean, any other questions, keep them coming. So we're talking about history tracking. Yes. So Version control systems contain a detailed history of changes made to files. Each change is associated with metadata, including the author, timestamp, and description of the modification. This historical record provides a clear timeline of project development. So let's go into the version control history again and pick this apart, kind of see some of these details that it's talking about. So we saw this like at the end of at the beginning of this stream, right? Here's a repository. Here's the like the version history, or the history of snapshots of the project throughout its development, which is in each snapshot, right, is a commit. So we see there's all these different snapshots, right? And as it said, here's the author, or the person who put it together, the title of it, just giving some context as to what this commit exactly does. And there's like metadata here with like these IDs. Yeah, it gets dark out so early now, and it just completely messes up with my circadian rhythm. I feel like it's like 2 o'clock right now. Not really, but it might as well be, honestly. So maybe I had to use a higher level in the URL. We're not going to low level code. Could possibly be. I'm not sure myself. So we have that. So yeah, that's a bit of the version control in terms of the history tracking. So another feature, version control, is collaboration, which it enables multiple developers to work on the same project concurrently. It prevents conflicts by allowing each user to create their own branch of the code, make changes independently, and merge their work with the main code base when ready, like as we talked about. Branching and merging. Branches are typically used for different features, bug fixes, or experimental work. Because again, you don't want to like do this crazy work for a new feature or for some like, experimental thing, whatever it is that you're doing on the main code base, and decide, oh, actually, I don't want to include this. Or like say you break everything, and it's like, oh, it'd be such a headache to have to reverse engineer and try to fix the main code base, get it back to a point where it's working. It's silly to do that. So instead, you take your main code base, you create a copy of it, you branch it off, and you develop your copy. That way, the main code base remains untouched, intact. That way, if things go awry, you decide not to implement the change or whatever it is, then it's not a big thing of work to just, continue with the code that works. That was working in the first place. So another feature or aspect is conflict resolution. When developers make changes to the same code simultaneously, conflicts may arise. Version control systems provides tools to resolve conflicts, ensuring that changes from different sources can be combined harmoniously. So we'll go hunting for some conflicts in a little bit. But that's definitely something to address when it comes to especially merging. So backup and recovery, version control acts as a backup system. If a mistake is made or code is accidentally deleted, previous versions can be restored, right? Just like I was talking about, right? If you want to develop a new thing, for example, you have like your original code base that remains untouched, and you have your branch that you can do whatever you want to, really. It's smart because it safeguards you against all sorts of stuff. So if a mistake is made or code is accidentally deleted, previous version can be restored. This is particularly valuable in avoiding data loss. Version control also enables itself in documentation. Developers can provide descriptive commit messages explaining the purpose of changes. Right, we saw that like here, right? You want to give titles to each of your commits to give some context as to what exactly each commit is doing. As we said, like a commit is like a meaningful snapshot. You don't want 7 different things, like 7 big different things that a commit does. Usually you want to modularize it, just that way things are, whatever, however you can make it like a meaningful, concrete stepping stones for your project. So as we see, each of these commits, they have titles. They help. This is a form of documentation in and of itself, right? It gives context. And you can also give like a more, so you can give it a title. You can also give like a more descriptive message. Seems like they did not do it there. They added, you don't always have to give like a detailed description. Sometimes the title is just enough. But you have the option to give more in-depth explanation as well. So with that is documentation. So documentation helps team members understand the history and context of code modifications. It's code review. There's features for code review, allowing developers to comment on and discuss proposed changes before they are integrated into the main code base. Right, that's what we saw with those pull requests. Right, there's these new features that people have developed that they want to add to the overall project, but before you do that, it can be helpful to have some discussion around it. So that's where the code review comes in. Security and access control. Version control systems offer access control mechanisms. Repository owners can control who can view, modify, or merge code, ensuring data security and compliance with organizational policies. Very important, but you don't want everyone in the world to have access to your to every single what's what I'm looking for like every single ability to change your code base, because then if everyone has full control, then anyone could just delete your repository, worst case. So you definitely don't want to do that. Or they can whoever has admin controls can admit or deny like pull requests, right? Changes to your code base. So you want to be careful on who you give that to. Just common sense stuff. Traceability. Version control enables traceability of changes, which can be essential for auditing, compliance, and project management. And so there's actually like various version control systems available. So Git is just one of them. So we haven't talked very much about Git yet in this talk here, but Git is kind of the foundation of how you really want to use GitHub. Git is that version control system. It's what allows you to take those snapshots, those different commits of your project as it's being developed. Again, Git is not the only solution for that, but it's by far the most popular. That's why this website is called GitHub, right? A hub for Git projects, a hub for projects which utilize Git. When they utilize Git, then you can take advantage of the snapshot of the commit feature of the version control aspect of it, which just makes your life so much easier programming and allows for so much flexibility in terms of what you can do for a project. So, but yeah, Git in particular has become the most popular version control system due to its speed, flexibility, and strong support for distributed development. Version control is a fundamental tool in modern software development, helping teams manage complex projects, collaborate efficiently, and maintain the integrity of their code base. So who here has used Git in GitHub? I'm just curious, because really it's something that I say everyone has to know how to use. Every software developer really has to have an understanding of Git and GitHub. I use it all the time. I actually did MLH's fellowship prep program. And guess what? We use GitHub for collaborating on our projects and for doing everything that we've been talking about today. We did, we branched and we forked and we did pull requests, and we merged our code that we all developed in our own separate branches to the main project. And that's just a small microcosm, like the fellowship prep program, and the when you go to the actual fellowship, or when you work on real world projects like these open source ones that we're seeing, or if you work for a company or whatever it is that you do, you're gonna have to collaborate with other people, and GitHub is a perfect just vehicle, and as it says in the name, the hub, for doing exactly that. Okay, let's see. We've got some discussion in the chat. So I asked how does everyone use GitHub if they use it? Let's see. It's been a while, but you have used GitHub. Sweet, sweet. I use it a lot, all the time, right? There we go. So although I really mean to get back to it, since I've forgotten most of the commands and shortcuts. Yeah, and as we saw, we had Sam Disconnected here say it's been a while since they've used GitHub. You don't have to be like a super savant at it or anything. Just generally knowing like what you can do with it. And I think that's the biggest thing. Just like knowing what you can do with it is important, is kind of the biggest thing. Because even if you've gotten the commands and shortcuts, you can always go back and relearn them like, pretty quickly. When I work with Git, I forget quite a bit of the Git commands, every once in a while, because sometimes I just don't touch Git all too much. But I always know how Git works. I just forget the exact commands and the like. And all I have to do is I search them up. Very quick Google search. It's not an issue at all. Very common in programming, actually, to have to, the goal is you want to know how to implement things, like conceptually, and like you want to know what's available to do that. But in terms of the actual, like commands to type out, you can always just Google them. So just starting using GitHub to track projects, do alongside Code Academy. Perfect. Yeah, that's actually a good way to get into the habit of it as well, of using GitHub and the like. So perfect. I've just started with the last couple of hackathons, but I still feel unsure of the things, but this is very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I hope this has been a good resource for everyone so far. We have an hour to go too. We're not even done yet. We have all the more to cover with this great GitHub stuff. So, and yeah, hackathons, that's also a perfect use for GitHub. If you're collaborating with people, especially if everyone's, you have this one code base, everyone's off doing their own task. One person's doing the UI, another person's doing the, back end, another person's doing the front end, another person's doing, who knows what. Keeping everything in sync together, making sure it all plays nice. GitHub is, it's the thing to do, really. Or at least that's what they say. But in my experience, it definitely is indispensable. So I've been using GitHub and Git for a few months, but only use git add, commit, and merge commands. Sometimes clone, etc., but no branching. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the heart of it, really, is because with that, just with git add, commit, and merge, you're still able to make like version control history and the like on your projects. But branching is definitely a very important thing that you want to do, because again, as we talked about, like if you want to develop a new feature, if you want to, maybe you want to develop a new, a new UI solution or whatever it is for your project. If you branch it off, you can play with the whole project. You can play with anything with the project in your quest to implement that new feature. And by the end of it, once you have developed, then you can just easily merge it to the main thing. And then there's no, again, because say you mess up this big feature or whatever, and now your code is all messed up. Or you have to just like, or, maybe it's not even that intense. Maybe it's just like, okay, I had this now, but I don't want it. And I don't want to clog up my code with all this unnecessary stuff. If you just have a branch of that feature or whatever it is that you developed, just delete the branch, boom, done. Takes 2 seconds. As opposed to like having to gut out the project of all these things that you were going to add, but ultimately didn't. It takes a lot longer, and there's a lot of room for error because you could easily like make typos, or you could forget how you did something and do. So branching is certainly powerful, even just working by yourself, but especially when you're working on collaborative projects, branching is important. It kind of helps just give additional context. People can see like what you yourself are working on. It helps like compartmentalize different developments as well. So pretty important. So where are we at with this? We said traceability. And yeah, so Git is the most popular version control system due to its speed, flexibility, and strong support for distributed development. Version control is a fundamental tool in modern software development, helping teams manage complex projects, collaborate efficiently, and maintain the integrity of their code base. So talking a lot. Let me get my sparkling water, and we'll jump right back into it in 5 seconds. Okay, so I have a bit on the history of GitHub. I don't really know if it's all that interesting or practical. I figured include more than less. Always a better thing to do. But well, let's see. Let me just kind of go through my notes here. Well, basically, it just talks about how GitHub was, it was based around version control and sharing your code and all that. And then eventually, it kind of grew for collaboration, and then like the social aspect where you could have discussion and conversations around the code, and then branching and pull requests and merging and just all that. It really grew. I mean, now today, GitHub is really kind of the central source for open source development. Many of the world's most important open source projects, including the Linux kernel, are hosted on GitHub. The platform made it easier for individuals and organizations to share and collaborate on open source software overall. And GitHub has integration with various CI/CD tools and services, which ultimately played a pivotal role in the adoption of automated testing and deployment in software development, improving code quality and release processes. And really just kind of went on to inspire all other sorts of collaborative and tools and code hosting platforms and so on and so forth. And two, just good to know, especially for us newer developers out there. A lot of people actually use GitHub profiles as professional portfolios, where if you're applying for an internship or a job, whatever, and they want to see like what your programming chops are like, they want to see some projects on your GitHub. That way they can dive in and just kind of get a sense of where you're at in terms of your skill, and just see that you have experience with, I mean, honestly, bare minimum, just to show that you understand how to do basic version control and use of GitHub and all of that. Like at the very least, just showing that you know how to do like commits and upload them onto GitHub, but also showing that you can make, meaningful commits. Like you can give quality documentation as to what you're doing, why you're doing it, being able to explain your code to others with your documentation in a viable and easily digestible and informative way, so on and so forth. I mean, even when it comes to just not even doing pull requests or any of that, like even when you just get down to the very, very basics, there's a lot that you can communicate to potential employers or collaborators or so on and so forth. And then from there too, like every software developer, they have to understand how to do how to work with like branching and pull requests, not just in and of themselves, but also as they should apply and as they should be utilized to developing a project. So that communicates a lot too. Like I've read stories of people where they didn't have like, it was either them or someone else that interviewed that were going to get chosen for an internship. And maybe this one person didn't have like the craziest coding skills as of yet, but their ability to document their projects on GitHub and make it easily digestible and accessible for other people who weren't familiar with the project, like it was worlds ahead of the person who was a lot more slick at coding. And as a result, the person that was able to utilize their documentation and everything ended up getting the internship, or they got the job, or whatever the case is. Definitely read quite a few stories like that. Okay, we got a bit more discussion here in the chat. Wow, so it can stand in place of a portfolio. I mean, really, it kind of is your portfolio, right? Because your portfolio are your coding projects. And what better place to put your coding projects up than on GitHub? And two, it's not just the code itself that you're showing off then. There's a lot of other things that are attractive to employers or collaborators or who else. like, again, showing that you can do proper documentation, showing that you can follow, that you know about version control, because it's super important for being able to collaborate, that you know about just all the other GitHub features for collaboration, like branching, forking, pull requests, all that sort of merging, all that sort of stuff. So it not only hosts your portfolio project, but also allows you to showcase other valuable skills that are needed. So very, it's pretty important. When I've applied for places, they've explicitly asked for GitHub profiles. Like, they wanted me to put my GitHub URL as part of the application. So very, very important. Okay, so we have another here. Branching is really good. I recently made a Python project which stopped running after I added a config file to the directory. But now I think I could simply do that to a branch instead of my main project and it wouldn't stop running. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. That is exactly a perfect use case, Shraddha. Right, so it just helps you save so much time. And I've had it even outside of coding, even in certain things where it's like I'm making a big change to something and it was such a big change and I went like so far off that I just kind of lost track of like what the project was even like at the very start, when in terms of like every single detail. So I try to implement this thing, it doesn't work out. So I try to gut out this new thing that I added, and I just couldn't do it fully. Or like I couldn't like figure out how things were at the very beginning before I touched them. And now everything's kind of screwed up a little bit and it's not as good as it used to be before I went in and changed things. So version control helps safeguard against that. So it's just unfathomably helpful. Plus you can add a web page CV to GitHub. Yes, that's also true. So lots that you can do with GitHub. Yeah, cool thing about GitHub is that you can also host your, like say if you have a web project, I did web development for quite a while. That's where I focused before I realized it just wasn't what I wanted to pursue. If you're doing web development, you can actually host the code in your repository. You can like directly manifest the web page from that code through GitHub. So I'll show you what I mean. This was, let me see. I'll pull up my, oh, actually, let's do this. I'll pull up a project of mine that I worked on. I did this for the last intro to GitHub. I used the same project, in fact, just kind of talk about things. This was a really early project I made. But what's cool about it is, actually, I think I bought an actual domain for this. I did. But, oh, wait, no, okay. So I did buy a domain for this. So it is like an actual website. But if I remember correctly, and I know that you can do this, GitHub just took this code and this code is a perfectly viable website, right? If you were to run this on your local machine, you would be able to locally host the web page that pops up. By being able to do this, by having a valid website within the code here, GitHub can just post it directly as this web page that I have here, as this overall site. And so then I, bought a domain and blah, 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 blah. But this is being hosted directly through my GitHub repository. So when I make a change to this GitHub repository, when I make a change to it, it automatically updates the live site as well. Pretty powerful. Oh, it's only, hold on. It's only sharing that one tab. It's kind of annoying. Let me show you guys the full tab or the full window. Here we go. So again, here's this project that I developed. So I go here. Here's all my code here. And when I have this code on my local machine as well. When I change the code on my local machine, I save it, I commit, I push that onto my GitHub. My GitHub gets updated. And when my GitHub gets updated, then the live site actually gets updated. So just cool stuff. Very, very cool. But anyways, what are we doing now? Well, let's jump back into here actually. Right, GitHub pages, exactly. Yeah. That is I don't have one made up off the that's readily available, but also powerful stuff. So with that, but yeah, I mean, this is just basic history of GitHub. Nothing too important there. I mean, just for our basic purposes. But actually, there's quite a bit, as we talked about. GitHub kind of came into its own as a champion for open source projects and just kind of the central place for them. And you can use it again. Super important. GitHub as your portfolio. Completely invaluable. And GitHub was acquired by Microsoft 2018. So just crazy stuff. So GitHub's history is marked by its rapid growth, evolution, and a strong commitment to open source. Its significance lies in revolutionizing collaboration, fostering a sense of community, and influencing the way modern software is developed, tested, and deployed. GitHub has become an essential platform for developers, teams, and organizations, and its impact on software development industry remains profound. So just pretty crazy stuff. So we already talked about, we actually covered these in pretty good detail. But I don't know, we can go through very, very briefly. We can see if there's anything just worth covering. So the repositories we already looked at, which hosts the source code, documentation, other assets for projects. And we know that they can be public or private. The commits, again, are like those snapshots of your project. And the commits themselves also act as a form of documentation, because for each snapshot, for each commit, you can give it a title, giving context to what exactly the meaningful change is that the commit embodies. You can give extended explanation on each commit, so on and so forth. The branches we already talked about helps you decentralize all of the changes that you make to the code base. Pull requests we talked about in terms of proposing changes to the main project overall. And then issues, again, too. If someone interprets something being wrong with the code base, they can raise that to other people's attention, which can spark discussion and ultimately potential changes to be made to the code base. And so all of these enable effective code management, teamwork, and the organization of tasks and features. So pretty powerful stuff. So really, to get the most out of GitHub, helps to make an account. Because with an account, you can make your own repositories. You can, then you can fork repositories by extension. You can upload your own code to your repositories. You can, so on and so forth. Just helpful stuff. I mean, it's pretty straightforward in terms of, let's see. Let's switch over to my other window and kind of see what the account setup looks like. I mean, if you sign up for an account and anything else, kind of basically the same thing, but doesn't hurt for us to take a gander real quick. Oops. Whoa. What just happened? Okay, my computer is freaking out right now. But let's do this. Here we go. Okay. So we go, okay, well, I love GitHub. Let's sign up. This seems cool. Let's make an account. So, oh my goodness. Enter my email. I love MLH at ilovemlh.com. Why not? Get a password. Do. Look at that password. I mean, it's just like you do for, for any website. It's nothing too crazy. Enter username. What was it really? Yeah. Oh. Wow, look at that. It's available. So anyways, you go through the whole process just like any other website, and you ultimately get your account. So let's switch over to my account, and you can see you can see, what's possible with an account. With my account. So we have that going. Here. Ugh. Here we go. So here I have my GitHub accounts. I have my profile. So I have my username. You can see my different repositories here, all the different code projects that I have up on here. Truth be told, I haven't been active on GitHub in a while. That is certainly going to change soon, though. Now that I can focus a lot more on coding again. But yeah, so different code-based projects that I have. See what they're all made with. See when I've updated them. Again, like all this stuff is documentation in a way too. Like even just the title of your project and the description of it. It's important to get that stuff right. I can add a picture of myself. I can add a little bit about me, so on and so forth. So nothing, just kind of stuff that you'd expect, honestly. But you can also follow people. So if there's people that you whose code that you like, or whose projects that you like, you can follow them. Or if someone's, people have found your projects and they like what you're doing, you can follow them and you'll get notifications on the stuff that they do. Again, it kind of goes back to that social aspect that I was talking about earlier. Stars. What did I start? Oh. So I started this project because evidently, there's something I liked about it, but I don't think I meant to star it. So, but yeah, starring projects, that way you can just keep track of things that you like. It's just, I don't know. I don't think it needs too much explanation. You can just kind of dive in and get acquainted with this sort of stuff. But anyways, that's your profile. You can also do things such as, like in your repositories, like what's one that I don't really care about. Here's one that I was just doing a basic web development for. This is a repository for basic projects. I just put this on GitHub just to practice GitHub stuff, but you can see it has access to stuff that every other repository has access to. Issues, pull requests, you can see my branches, you can see my commit history. Here is the website as hosted on GitHub, as I was talking about. Right, this is a valid website. It's got HTML file, really all that you need at the most basic of levels. So with that, GitHub can just immediately, directly host a web page through it. So that's what we have here. And again, if I were to go and make changes to my code base, push them on the GitHub, it would all automatically be reflected in this website as you see here. That's what we were talking about with the GitHub pages. Powerful stuff. So with that, there's a bunch of other things that I can do since this is my own repository, my own project. There's all sorts of stuff that I could add. I can add people to this, like I can add collaborators and give them, well, I'm not going to put in my password right now, but I can add collaborators. So I can add other people's GitHub accounts to this project to give them special permissions so that they too can, approve pull requests and so on and so forth. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of common sense, or maybe it's a bit more, a better word. It's kind of intuitive once you just kind of think about the GitHub workflow and everything, and get your hands dirty with it. But if there's any questions or the like on that sort of stuff, please let it be known. We can have a discussion on it. So with that, yeah, basic stuff there. Let's see what else we can dive into with that. I mean, yeah, it's nothing like too crazy in terms of account setup. Nothing too crazy. And we saw you can set up your basic account and some of the things that you can do with it, as I just showed. I do want to get into a little bit on Git, so I don't want to spend too much time on this sort of stuff, especially since it's so intuitive. If you have experience setting up an account on any other website, which I'm assuming you all essentially have, just as living in the current age. GitHub's web interface. Okay, this would be kind of fun. Let's go into here. So, well, let's see. So we're going to cover access to the user dashboard, which we already saw. We saw all my repositories that I had. But you can also, as it says here, you can explore repositories, activity feed. You can see other people's repositories that exist on GitHub because it's like the hub for Git projects, for programming projects that use Git. And there's certainly a lot of those. Since Git is just version control, it's still snapshots of your project, which again, basically everyone will definitely want to use. So let's explore a little bit with that. Not you, but actually, yeah, we can use this tab. That's fine. If it pulls up at least. Here we go. So as we saw, we can go to we can explore and look at different repositories. Or here. So it looks like they have their own GitHub News. Crazy. Trending repositories, trending developers. Based on repositories I've started. What diamonds? I don't know. It's definitely cool stuff. So let's look at some of these trending repositories. Just, you can just, there's a lot to GitHub, as you can see. It all, of course, centers around repositories, code bases, of course. But it's quite a bit possible with that. Do this. Image to video synthesis for character animation. Animate anyone. Interesting. Oh, that's kind of funny. Oh, man. Wow. Animate anyone. That is crazy. Okay, cool. Anyways, yeah, you can definitely spend a lot of time on here exploring different projects and the like. Definitely an interesting website overall. But let's jump back to the meat of things. Let's start a bit on how to, just utilize the service to utilize GitHub for, your own stuff. So creating a repository, definitely an essential need to know skill. So there's quite a few ways that you can, I guess there's a couple of ways that you can create a repository, really. In terms of creating a repository from scratch, we'll definitely focus on. So let's get into here. So let's say I want to start a repository. I have a new project that I'm working on with Git on my local machine, and I want to host that code somewhere. So my profile and go to my repositories, and I can do new repository. New right here in this in the upper right hand corner here, new. So here, repository template, I don't have any of these, no. Repository name, demo repository, and I can give additional info. So keep that blank for now. Add a README. Let's do that, sure. Choosing a license. Why not? I just want to randomly choose a license, but we'll do that for now. I can choose if it's public or private. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, honestly. Just put together a repository. And there we go. Now I have my repository. And I even have a README and I even have a license for it. Right? Easy enough. So what you can do, what you usually typically want to do, is to like create a project on your local machine and sync it up with this specific repository so that when you make changes to your code base, when you make changes to your code base, like on your local machine, you can then have those changes be reflected on your GitHub repository. It doesn't happen automatically when you change your code on your computer or on your local machine. It doesn't automatically update GitHub because that way you can have like a lot more control over things. But again, we'll see that in just a minute. But here we have a repository. You can, again, the most standard thing to do is to actually connect it to your, project on your local machine, a directory of a folder of just a project that you're working on. But you can actually add files and write code and everything right in GitHub, right in your repository itself on GitHub. If I do add file here, I do create new file, I can just create a file. So I can go, okay, see if I can make a basic HTML page. Let's do H1. World. So this is just basic HTML code. This is my web page hosted on my very own GitHub repository. How nice. /p. We can call this index.html. And so I'm making this file. You can see that it's already like it's baked into how this works. It's going to create a commit. It's going to create a snapshot. It's going to use version control. So commit changes. So again, we give a title to the commit, as we have here, which again is kind of its own form of documentation. I could give extended description, not really a big thing. I could either commit directly to the main branch or create a new branch for this commit instead of pull request. Again, this is all stuff that we talked about. Now, again, you typically don't do things this way. Usually, like for big projects and the like, you're not going to code them directly in GitHub. Typically going to do it on your code editor. But again, just kind of nice seeing what's possible here, seeing a little bit more about how GitHub handles these sorts of things. Because this is intro to GitHub, of course. Here, commit changes. So now here I have my HTML file. And I have this here. So now, actually, I want to see if I could host that. If I could do GitHub pages for this, that'd actually be kind of funny. Pages. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to try and have GitHub host this as an actual website. Because all you need really is an HTML file at the very least. Well, actually, I might need a like boilerplate, actually. But we'll see if that works. So now I'm going to go, okay, I want this to be hosted as a website. Settings, go down to pages, go down to deploy this page. Actually, let's do no. Won't let me do that actually. I don't think so. Anywho, I don't know. I'm not going to mess with this too much. It's not really the most important thing as of right now. But this is helpful for if you do web development, actually. That way you can like easily show your projects. But yeah, more of a fun thing. Or more of a like web development focused thing, actually. But just good to know. Especially since so many applications and the like if you do hackathons, not rare at all for people to have their applications be web-based because it's just kind of so easy to set up and get running a website as opposed to and for like other people to access and then use themselves because they don't have to like download your code or anything. They can just use it. They can just access the website. Powerful stuff. So anyways, we have that in place. Let's go into the basics of Git now. We have about half an hour left. Seeing how Git interfaces with GitHub would be pretty valuable. So at this point, I mean, just check it in the chat again. Any questions or any comments, any points of discussion that you'd like to make, or anything within that vein. Too, it could be on Git as with GitHub, on Git, or really just in general, by all means. Okay, so with that, let's delve into Git. And with Git, we can really see like how you'll most often be interfacing with GitHub as a developer. So this is the part, honestly, that's pretty important. Now that we understand the essential concepts of GitHub and like how to utilize it, like at least in theory, we can see how to actually use it with our coding projects. So this is kind of the pretty important, very, very important. So with that, let's go ahead and just kind of get this going. So I sold my music here. Awesome. So we're going to set up VS Code. I'm going to go in and make a new directory. Oh, I have a lot of Python stuff open right now. I'm teaching myself Python. Anyways, in fact, I'm curious for everyone in the chat, what do you do programming-wise? Like, what's your focus? What's your interest? I did web development for quite a while, and I thought that's where I wanted to go. But I realized that I just don't really have an interest in websites and in web development as a whole. So now I'm looking more into like engineering focused. Like I'm thinking about going for either electrical or mechanical engineering, and then just having a heavy software focus. And from there, just doing stuff like data analysis and the like with tools like Python, or doing like controls, low-level electronics with like C++ and all of that. So, but with this whole coding journey of mine, and I'm sure with everyone else's, Git will always be around. GitHub will certainly be around. So, but yeah, so we have Git, we have not Git, but VS Code set up here. We can now let's see, window. Here we go. Okay, so we're gonna start a new project. We can do new. So I have this opened up. Man, there's quite a few windows that I want to use here. I have VS Code here, but I suppose that I should be annoying. Wish I could show multiple screens. There's actually quite a few things to show here, but I have my my command line here. So I'll put up. And here I just have an empty folder. You can see I have my documents. I have, this is like one of my coding folders folder. And now I have this project here, demo repo, I called it. It's not really a repository because it's not on GitHub, but it's ultimately going to, whatever. It's just a folder, that's all. That's going to house my project. So if I try to see, okay, are there any, it's just an empty folder. I just created it. So if I say list all the things within this folder, it doesn't show me anything because there's nothing within here. What I want to happen is when I go on to like make changes within this folder, because this folder is going to be like a project, like I'm going to make a website within it. So I want all this website's code to eventually be on my GitHub on a specific repository for it. Well, first I have to develop code for it. And even before I do that, actually, I want to initialize this project as a Git project. So basically what that means is I want to enable the use of version control within it. So I want to be able to take snapshots of my code, be able to put those snapshots onto GitHub and be able to make branches and all that sort of stuff. So the way that we do that is I have my empty folder. This is the folder that I want to use to where like everything is going to exist within it. It's the most top level folder for this project. Once I'm in there, I'm going to do git init, and this is going to allow me to do git stuff. If I don't do git init, if I try to do different git things like git status or git add, you can see it has not a git repository. So as in git is not activated for use in this project just yet in this folder. So what I have to do to be able to do git commands is do git init. Now it is a now I can actually do git stuff within it. So now if I do git status, for example, now it actually like gives me the proper output. I can actually use that command. So now I actually have to do stuff. I have to make changes within this Git repository. So if I do touch index.html, that's just going to make a HTML file. I can call it whatever I want. Doesn't really matter. I'm just adding something. So now if I say, okay, well, show me everything within this project now, we can see, or show me everything within this folder, right? Within this project, within this folder. There I have my HTML file. And I can do, okay, well, let's do a CSS file as well. So if I do show me everything within here, list, I see my two files. So remember I did git status before and it said there's nothing's different about it because I still had an empty folder, nothing changed. But now I added these two files. Even if I just added one file, right, that's a change. Now if I do git status, it's going to say, hey, there's these two new files here. Just bring this to your attention. It's up to you if you want to do something, right? That's what Git's telling me. Hey, you have these two files here. Bring this to your attention. You might want to do something about these. So just here they are. Just know that that I'm not doing anything with this right now. So what I would go on to say is, okay, well, again, it's up to me to take the snapshot of my project, right? Where I say, okay, something meaningful enough. There's been enough meaningful changes to, there's been enough progression within this meaningful task within my project that I'm going to ultimately like include these files, take a snapshot within it, or to take a snapshot of things. So my first snapshot, my first commit here is going to be that I created the basic, and let's say this is just a basic website. So just HTML, just CSS files, that's perfectly fine for that. Let's say that I just created the basic projects or the basic files for it. So I can say, okay, well, I have these two files. I want them both to be included in this snapshot. So I'm going to say git add, and I can do both of them. So git add it's kind of like, so ultimately we're going to make a snapshot, right? And it's going to be like in each snapshot as we have them all, the whole collection of them as we develop the project. It's going to be kind of like a timeline for the project where you can then go back to each snapshot. And you can see the files, how they existed then, and so on and so forth. This git add is kind of like getting everyone that you want within the picture that you're going to take. So say I have like, 5 different files and but I'm developing these changes only within like 2 of these files that I want to include in my snapshot. So this git add is kind of like getting around the people. It's getting the people, gathering them together, the ones that I actually want to take a snapshot of for this like meaningful moment, for this meaningful context, whatever it is. So I say git add app.css, index.html. So now I have my people around for my snapshot that I want to take a snapshot of. I can say git status again, and it'll give me additional info. It's saying, okay, so now you have your people around, but you haven't taken a picture yet. I'm ready for you to take a picture if you need to. That's what Git's telling us. So now we're going to take our snapshot. We're going to take our picture. We're going to create our commit. by doing git commits, and just git commit works. That'll create a commit, but you never really just do that, because again, you want to give context as to why you're taking this commit, or why you're making this commit, why you're taking this snapshot. I want to give context as to why. So we'll say we created, or you don't use like you use I forget the the linguistic term for it, but there's like a certain case that you use. I think it's the imperative, where it's kind of like you're giving a command. You always use that when making Git messages. It's just the standard. So let's look in the chat. Yep. So I'd say create create basic setup. I don't know, kind of vague, but it works for our purposes here. So now, if I do git status, so I just made that commit, right? So nothing. So I just made that commit. Now we're in a new, like, now nothing has changed relative to the last commit that I made, because I just made the commit. I didn't do anything from there. So if I do git status, it's going to say there's nothing changed, right? There's nothing changed from my last change. And now I can go on and I can do other stuff. Like I can add another file, or I can like edit the code within these files. So in fact, let me do that. I'm going to switch over to VS Code so we can see my stuff. So we can see these. So we can see these files that we just made, and we can edit the code within them. So we can see right there. There's the app.css. There's the index.html that we made. So let's go into this index.html. Let's say I do, oh, annoying. Hold on. Let's do HTML. Let's say I just want to set up basic boilerplate for this. So HTML5, let's say that. So I mean, adding boilerplate, probably wouldn't do a commit just for this, because it's such a basic thing. It's like, why are you wasting a picture? Not wasting, but it's like, why are you taking a snapshot of that? So basic. Just for our purposes, though, this will work. So I made this change to my HTML file, right? There's nothing in it before. Now I added this code. So if I go into Git now, and I go git status, you can see, hey, there's a change in the index.html. So I go, okay, well, I'm going to make a commit for that. That's meaningful enough for me, at least for our purposes here. I'm going to go git add index.html, or you can just do a dot, and that will add all of your files that are modified. Sometimes we'll kind of get into it, but anyways, we'll explain that in a second. Here's this. Now I do git status. So I added that file. I added all files, but there's only just this one. So I just added the one file. I do git status. Now it's saying, okay, well, your index.html, you gathered everyone that you want to take a picture of. It's this one file. So now I go, okay, I have that. And so I'll do just git commit. And I'll say add HTML boilerplate. And boom. So now, again, I just made that snapshot. Nothing has changed. I just made it 2 nanoseconds ago. Nothing has changed from there. So I do git status. There's nothing to report. I could see all the history of the commits that I made if I do git log. So you can see here's my first commit that I made just a few minutes ago, and here's the commit I had just made. So it's a log of all your commits. Just like how on GitHub, you can go on and see your commits in the appropriately named like commits portion of your repository. So we have this. This is really kind of the basic workflow of Git, like of the absolute most basic things to do. Now, again, you want to do branches and stuff for when you go on to develop a new feature like. So let's say I have, let's say I want to add a new feature or something. I want to add like dark mode or whatever to whatever it is that you're developing. You want to add a new feature or a bug fix or something, but you don't want to change the main code base, as we were talking about. Because if you change the main code base as you're trying to work on this one thing, maybe you fail at doing it, or maybe something breaks, or maybe you don't want to implement this thing in the end. And you don't want to have all that baggage in your main code base or something that you don't want to implement in the end anyway. So smart thing to do is that instead of editing your main code base from the get-go and having that be like having that be a destructive process, you can take the non-destructive route. Destructive as in like you make changes that you can't like easily revert. You can take the non-destructive route, which is just making a branch where you just make a copy of your code. So I can do git switch C. So this is basically saying, hey, I want to make a branch. I want to make a copy of my code as I have it now. I want to make like a parallel universe of it where I just want to make a parallel universe of it essentially. And then I can go on and do whatever I want in that parallel universe without affecting like any of the others. So I git switch C, and then I can name it. Let's say this is dark mode. So let's say I want to implement a dark mode color scheme in my website. So if I do git branch, it should list all my branches. So I have the master branch, right, which is the one that your project defaults on. And now I have this dark mode branch. So you can see here, it says dark mode, right? I'm in the dark mode branch of my project. Just like before I was in the master of my project. Now I'm in the dark mode branch. So now I can go on and I can make changes to this code. Oh, actually, oh man, annoying. I have to show my git bash. Sorry about that. So just a bit of a rewind. So we get in the project, we made these files. I ended up, and then we made our first commit with it, saying, hey, I made these files. I want to make a snapshot of the project with that. Then I went into VS Code and I changed my HTML code. I added a boilerplate, which I just added some basic code to my HTML file. And I said, okay, good enough for me to make a snapshot that was meaningful enough of a change. And so again, I gather my files around that I want to include in this snapshot, which was just HTML at this point. It was the only thing that I changed, the only thing that I really could add, is the only thing with the change. And then from there, I made my snapshot, right? I committed it, and I made that commit here. And then I said, okay, get log, so I can see my different snapshots here, all my different commits. So there's that first one I made, create basic setup. And there's a second one I made, add HTML boilerplate. And then I just made this new branch here where I said, if you do git switch -c, that creates a new branch and immediately switches you to it. So you can start working within it. So again, it's like a parallel universe of your code that you had. So with that, now if I go into VS Code and I start working on the code, it'll be the code within this branch. So I'll pull that up. Let's see. Here. So it looks just exactly like the master branch code because I made a carbon copy of it. But here, if I make changes to this code and I save it and everything, these changes are not going to be present in the master branch. Because again, it's like parallel universes that can go on and do their own independent thing. So let's do that. Let's make some changes. We can just say body. We can say background color black. And there we go. There's our dark mode. That's all you need, right? So we have our dark mode code. Now if I go to my git bash, just to show you our code here. So if I do git status now, again, we're in the dark mode branch. If I do git status, it shows you that, okay, your app.css was modified. We did that because that was the file that we changed the code within to add our dark mode. So if I do git add, and I go, okay, I'm going to add this app.css. I can either do this or the blah, 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 whatever. Oops, this works. And I do, okay, that's good. Now let's take this picture, add dark mode. So there we go. So I'm going to commit for that. So if I do git log, You can see there's the dark mode git. There's the dark mode commit along with my first other two. But again, remember that this dark mode is a separate branch. It's like a parallel universe of the master branch. So if I go branch master, oh wait, git switch master. Can I do that? There we go. Oh, get out of here. So now I'm on my master branch, right? I was on the dark before. Then I said git switch master. Now I'm on my master. If I do git log, guess what? I'm not going to see my dark mode commit because that happens on the master branch. And if I go into VS Code and I look at my code, dark mode code isn't going to be in the app.css because, again, it happens in that different parallel code base. So if I switch back to dark mode, actually, if I could do git merge, is it? Dark mode. So now I said, okay, well, I want to take the code that is different, that exists. I want to take the code that exists in the dark mode that's different from the code in the master branch, and I want to implement that dark mode code into the master branch code. So now the master branch has all of the commits and everything and the code changes and the like. As all the changes that I committed in the dark mode branch, the master code branch now has, or the master branch now has. So if I do git log, we're going to see we have that add dark mode commit. And now we're going to have like a dark mode code that went along with it. So that's that. That's a basic primer on Git. So now what I want to do ultimately is, we haven't talked about GitHub at all with this yet because it's just Git stuff. What you can do is you can hook up the Git repo that you made, like we just made that Git repo on my one account. Right, let me go to GitHub and we'll look at this. Right here I have my repo and I can go, okay, well, here's the URL for it. Ultimately, you can hook up the URL of your repo to your code base in Git to then take your code and push it. We call it, is the term for it. You push the code from your local machine onto your GitHub repository. So that once, so that with this, I could have the code in my, well, I mean, I added these files in the like here. I should probably remove them. Or like, if I were to push it, I might have to merge these files that are already existing on the repository. I have to merge them with my code on my machine and blah, blah, blah. A bit more straightforward when you, I mean, it's not like too much work. It's a little tiny bit more straightforward if you just have a blank repository and do stuff with it. But anyways, with that, you can see like how this all connects, right? You take that code from your local machine, have it reflected on your repository, and you just kind of go from there. Then you have like the whole purpose of GitHub unlocked. And I don't know, it's just powerful stuff. Again, that's kind of where everything really comes into play, like how you will actually utilize GitHub as a developer in your day-to-day. Is you'll develop things on your machine and push it onto GitHub, or you'll take code from GitHub and download it onto your machine. So with that, that's really our intro to GitHub. Hope it proved helpful. Hope it proved useful. If there's any, well, we have quite a few here, blah, 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 blah. We actually covered, a lot of the slides that we just kind of skipped over, but I think what we covered was a lot more practical. So that was good. So with that, any questions or any comments, anything of the sort, by all means, while we have these few minutes left, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We can talk about them. And two, I'll throw a question out there for everyone. What was the one thing from this intro to GitHub demonstration event that you didn't really understand as well as before, that you didn't know about, or that you were able to pick up through this? Just curious. I run this event quite a bit, and I do it a bit differently each time. When I first did it, very much kind of, I had slides for that too, and I stuck to those and kind of just established more of a conceptual foundation. But as I've been doing it more and more, I like just getting on GitHub and just kind of peeking around and showing how all these different things, like the issues and the branching and the pull requests and all that, how it all comes together, like how that all actually functions and looks on GitHub. I think it's a lot more helpful just to show people like the living, breathing aspect of that. But yeah, I'll wait a couple more minutes to see if there's anything that pops up in the chat. Heck, we can maybe look at a couple repositories in the meantime. Let's look at, let's explore some. We have a couple of minutes left. Again, if anyone has any questions, by all means, go ahead and drop them in the chat. But let's see what else is available, what else is trending. Oh, JavaScript algorithms, nice. I use that for teaching web dev. Provides APIs. I feel like some of these explanations kind of crack me up. Maybe I just don't have the know-how. Maybe I just am not like embedded enough within the lingo and the like. When I read like, enables you to safely and predictably create, change, and improve infrastructure, I feel like it's kind of vague. It always makes me wonder, like, what exactly does that mean? Hunt down social media accounts by using them across social networks. Seems interesting. We have there's a few things that I contribute to. Like we have social media department or communications department, so this actually might come in handy. Interesting. I'm actually going to keep a tab open on that. Let's see, what's the best way to protect your main branch? I guess it kind of depends on the context of what would make, like, why your main branch would be vulnerable in the first place. I mean, definitely, if you have a repository that's public, only give advanced permissions, like being able to like directly affect the main branch and everything without any sort of like, be careful who you give admin permissions to, which is, pretty, I think most people would know that, but that's a given. It says your main branch isn't protected. I'd have to see what you mean. I'd be curious about that. Yeah, if there's like a particular instance where that's popping up for you, I'd have to see that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what pull requests do, is that they help protect your main branch. That's kind of like the main thing. Because with pull requests, you have the ability to say yes or no in terms of proposed changes to the overall project. If you didn't have pull requests, then people could just willy-nilly just add to the original project, and who knows what they'll do in that case. Who knows what will result from the things that they try to push through. So hope that gives some helpful perspective. But with that, we are at the hour. This has been Intro to GitHub. I hope it's been insightful and has given a decent overview of everything that you'll have to know. With it, you should be pretty well prepared to at least understand the basic GitHub workflow, the basic Git workflow, understand people's conversations when they talk about basic GitHub usage and the like. I don't know. With all of that, thank you all for joining me tonight. And please go ahead and enjoy the rest of this Global Hack Week. A lot of fun events coming up. With that, have a great rest of your day. Have a good one, everyone.